Greetings to everyone who is actually willing to come to this very unfortunate section, always after lunch. This is the most difficult one. The stomach is heavy, and the eyes are sleepy. And for this reason, I will be today your entertainer. It won't be only me, but I also merge forces with a good friend of mine called GDP. So we will ask Chat what thinks, and we will think all together. I hope I'll keep you on the edges. I think at the end we'll come to some reasonable conclusions. Here the speakers are already some are nervous. Please don't be. We are nice. I changed a little bit composition, so it will be a little bit maybe more dynamic. So the title of today's discussions will be Green Industry. Here, all that we live in unprecedented environmental changes. Everyone is seeing that the life is changing, the climate is changing. We see first time basically pollution, resource depletion, and all these changes are basically making us, or even better saying, forcing us to strategically rethink how we behave, how we act, how we live. As well as, on other sides, since we are talking about green industry, how to do green business. If you refer, where the term green industry comes from, so green industry refers to manufacturing of goods and provision of services that have minimal impact on the environment and promote sustainable development. Okay, but we'll question this a little bit later. It involves the use of clean technologies, the efficient use of resources, and adaptation of sustainable business practices. All this sounds very boring and heard too many times. But, to conclude my statement, we'll also go with the green industry slogan. Let's read the green industry slogan. So green industry is not only good for the environment, but also presents a significant economic opportunities. It can create new jobs, drive innovation, and promote economic growth, all, reducing the dependence on infinite resources and helping to mitigate climate change. All sounds great. But, we'll talk about reality. So here is, going back to the reality is, I need actually to refer to today's plenary speaker, who's unfortunately not here. Otherwise, we could challenge her. So the biggest actually challenge is, you might not notice this. She put in a title, Decoupling Economic Growth from Environment. So environment, depletion, etc. But the real challenge here is this decoupling. What she didn't tell you is that I'm also with the Club of Rome, and Club of Rome was one of the first who actually said in 50s when they put together the first paper, is the limits to the growth, is what the extent of the growth possible at all is. So here, the next question which Club of Rome is dealing is actually exactly how to make a model sustainable in order to decouple the economic growth from the depletion of resources, environment, etc., which is actually depleting the human population at all. But before we go to our speakers, let's ask my friend GDP what thinks. So I put a question here. Can you tell me if economic growth can be decoupled from environmental degradation? And you know what the GDP says? The concept of decoupling economic growth from environment, of course, is boring. Degradation has been much of subject of debate between economists, policymakers, and environmentalists, while some argue that it's possible to achieve economic growth without causing harm to the environment. Others believe that the two are inherently linked. For this reason, we have today scientists, policymakers. Unfortunately, we don't have the finance part to discuss this issue, but we'll deal with this further on. Since we have scientists on one side, the GDP goes on and says, in theory, if possible, for economic growth to be decoupled from environmental degradation, for the use of more sustainable, I need glasses, but so I'm making mistakes. So don't worry about this. More sustainable and efficient production and consumption methods. For example, investing in renewable energy, reducing waste and pollution, and promoting sustainable agriculture and forestry practice can help to reduce the environmental impact on economic activity. We all know this. We heard this before. Okay. Since he's boring, he still says a couple of things. However, in practice, achieving decoupling has proven to be challenging, and there is a limited evidence to suggest that is happening at the scale and pace that is necessary to prevent catastrophic environmental consequences. This is worrying. This is because many of the practices. I'll read without them. I'm still struggling. I'm still young. Although I cannot see anything close by. I got distracted. Like these old professors, I'm also old. This is because many of the practices have driven economic growth, such as burning of fossil fuels and the expansion of industrial agriculture and forestry, which cause significant harm to the environment. Additionally, current economic system is based on the idea of endless growth. Do you remember what I said about the limits of the growth? Okay. Which is inherently unsustainable in the world with infinite resources. No, actually it's finite resources. I've been checking if you're paying attention. Therefore, achieving decoupling may require fundamental changes in the way the economies are structured and managed. That means we actually, in reality, need to undergo serious social and economic changes. So in summary, he says, while it is theoretically possible to decouple economic growth from the environmental degradation, achieving it in practice will require significant changes to the way we produce, consume goods and services, as well as the way that our economies are structured and managed. I think this is actually the key point which should we be addressing today. And I didn't introduce myself, so I'm Professor Uroš Cvelbar from Jozef Stefan Institute, and I'll be your moderator today beside Chat GDP. He should have some kind of a nicer name. This is really, he should be like Neo, Frank, or this would be probably a better name. It's hard to get this. And, and today, we'll get involved in this conversation, especially tackling this coupling, decoupling. And on this side, I will introduce you to the Leon Stille, who's Managing Director of New England Institute, Sweden, Netherlands. He will explain a little bit more probably about the company also later. Then with us is Roberta Cvetkovska. I think I said it right. So she is a scientific researcher and chair of energy network technologies at the University of Leoben from Austria. And on my right side is Mathilde Cluzeau, which is coordinator of communication and fundraising at the WindAid Institute, who's going to be more into wind industry. I forgot to mention here that we're going to start with energy transition. We'll talk about complementary technologies which we had before to the batteries. So here Roberta will talk about the hydrogen, then we'll move to the wind energy, and at the end we'll end up with Professor Antonio Marcomini. I should say it. Marcomini. Marcomini pronunciation. My Italian pronunciation should be better. Who's Vice-Rector of the relations with territory Ca' Foscari University in Venice, who will be dealing more with the policy aspect. And unfortunately, we don't have with us on we were supposed to have also Fabien Levillian, hope pronounce it well, who is actually with Paribas, so Bank PNB Paribas, who was supposed to talk on investment side. But unfortunately, the investment side will be left out. But I will, at the end, maybe ask our other speakers what they think about these things. Because I think that the investment part and economic finances of this are one of the most important drivers of this, even transition. So we start in beginning with our first presenter. It's some kind of a weird. I would be more comfortable if I would ask questions, be a little bit provocative, but we left now speakers to present a little bit. Yeah. So he will present a little bit on the backbone of industry and energy to understand a little bit the background. And I would like to ask him to give some kind of overview of energy transition. So where are we going? So COVID is energy transition. Where are we going with energy transition? To see what is in front of us, what we can expect, and what can in reality we achieve with this, and maybe how much this will cost us. If I would be a president, I would definitely be wondering what would be that cost with some of these putting on my budget as and I need to pay for it. So please, Leon.
Thank you very much. For those of you who are wondering about Sweden, the Netherlands, that I still struggle with getting a good answer to that. I am from the Netherlands, but I recently moved to Sweden, so that's why Sweden, the Netherlands. And no, I cannot speak very good Swedish yet, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I will say something indeed about, I don't have any slides, so that's good, I think. Say something about the green industry, energy transition, just to set the scene a little bit for the rest of the speakers, and indeed for ChatGDP to get some nasty questions my way. Industry, of course, if I don't include electricity production from fossil fuels, industry is about 10% of the CO2 emissions in total. In the European Union, across the world, it's even a little bit more, of course. So it's an important sector that needs to be decarbonized. I think they know that themselves as well, but they find it quite difficult to do. The reason for that is, in that sense, you have to look back a little bit in history. Also, if I take the example of my home country, the Netherlands, we had a lot of cheap natural gas available at some point. So our whole industrial scenario or strategy was based on the fact that you have this cheap gas and that you can just produce a lot of stuff against a very low price. So you see that everywhere in Europe actually being the case. That industry is often linked to large scale, certain natural resources that are available, fossil resources like coal, but also natural gas. And that these in order for them to be competitive, the prices need to be very low. Now that's a difficulty if you then have to change. If you have to do a decarbonization step, that makes it hard. Decarbonizing industry is absolutely possible, but then you need to do it sort of more or less in the right way. And if you only look at the technology parts of that, then you can say, okay, let's electrify a lot of the processes, but that is difficult for a lot of industries to do because sometimes they need molecules themselves. For example, chemical industry often has already a molecule that they require to convert it into something else. But of course, you also have a lot of processes that are very high temperature. So even that can be electrified, but it is hard to do. So I think in that sense, decarbonization of industry is something that needs to be done in a right way and needs to be connected to the processes and the things that they are used to already. So for example, hydrogen can be a very good way of decarbonizing parts of this industrial chain because it's a molecule, they know how to sort of handle it and use it. A lot of chemical industry, for example, already uses hydrogen as an input, but they convert it and they take it from, for example, natural gas. So they don't necessarily use natural gas, they use hydrogen already. But of course, we need to do it right. For a long time, the industry was not really, it is in the ETS system, in the emission trading system scheme. But if you look at how the energy transition is developing in Europe, a lot of attention was on electricity production, and we're doing that quite well, I think. But if you look at the total mix, then the molecules are still a little bit left behind if you talk about greening those. So there we really have to step up our game, because now only about 3 or 4% of the total molecule stream is being decarbonized, and that's not something that we have to take for granted, that we will magically at 2030 or 2050, 100% will be decarbonized. So in order to do that, you see that there's a lot of pressure on industry. The ETS system is really helping, because now it becomes more and more expensive to pollute, to emit CO2. So more and more of these industries are being put under the ETS system, but also less of these free certificates are coming out. So you see that the price is now up almost at 100 euros per ton or something like that, maybe a little bit less now. But that makes that a lot of these technologies that are inherently expensive, like hydrogen, but also carbon capture and storage, but biomethane actually as well, become into the range where the pain for industry is so high that they can also invest in these technologies. And that's, I think, something that you really, really see happening. A lot of industries have a more or less a clear pathway to decarbonize. And I think that they can do that with the carbon capture and storage, with biomethane and with hydrogen. And hopefully we'll see in the coming years some more serious commitments about how to do that. Because if I can take one small example of how difficult it actually is, but also that it is possible. In the Netherlands we have a very large steel plant from Tata Steel. If you want to decarbonize that with hydrogen, you have to actually put, with green hydrogen, you have to put 1/3 of the area of the North Sea full of windmills, and then you make enough electricity to generate enough green hydrogen for only one steel plant. So it's quite a challenge to do this right, and I hope that we will see that there will be some more technological breakthroughs, but a combination of technologies will probably be the way forward for industry to really decarbonize. But it's absolutely possible, especially with hydrogen, I hope. And I think that my colleague next to me has something more to say about hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Now we at least see the challenge. One quick question here is, I was always wondering, how do you see, one of the biggest challenges is, it's not the energy, which is actually the biggest problem, and, but also the way how we utilize it, and, how much in terms of, because in reality, we are wasting most of the energy, through heat, etc. Could be a possibility that we could strategize that, when you're putting, I don't know, I'm making up now, but, if you put a stove or a fireplace, you also need to add to the fireplace, the collector of heat, that you need to wind up, so you're using the extra heat for heating up. Or, could be this a way that maybe Europe could tackle this in a way that you say that, nothing can be built in which is not used as an energy source more than 50%?
Yeah, well, that's of course possible. I mean, energy efficiency, what you're basically talking about, is of course the mainstay of basically the whole energy transition. So more than 50% will be on that. In industry, there's still a long way to go, but it's also something that has been talked about and researched for I don't know, decades already.
But it's not emphasized on the policy side.
No, that's true, because it's not very sexy.
Yeah.
People like to invest more in new technologies and things that make it easy for them to just switch the system the way they are used to, and not really also invest in these kind of things.
But it will be
but
easier
it will definitely
and cheaper
be there.
And faster.
Yeah.
Because this would be called hybrid, energy harvesting.
But you will also get more of a lock-in. So you also have to be careful with that, because if for example, if you build your whole system on the fact that this industry has a lot of excess heat, then and at some point you still have to stop using the fossil fuels source that you have there, then you have locked in your system in that sense.
But you have like thermoelectrics, you have,
yeah, but then you need to switch that too. So everything is possible, and maybe it's a good idea, especially in the medium term, so to say. But I think that's usually what, from an environmental perspective, keeps people from doing that. And I think on the other hand, it's just not sexy enough that you have to have energy efficiency. Okay. That's the best idea. Or not using it at all is even better. But
okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for this perspective. Now we are going to Roberta. Now the question here for her is, we want to hear a little bit about hydrogen and possible pathways, how to broaden the implication and use in the industry? What are maybe pits and faults of this technology, and where we do see the progress in these terms? Oh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Cvelbar. And I am Roberta, a scientific researcher from Leoben, Austria, originally from Macedonia. And I'm sitting here in front of a big challenge, because this is not a simple question to answer to. But I am happy because my slides are complementary actually to your talk, what you said before and what I will tell you. And for that purpose, I will go a few steps backwards and tell you something about the energy system and how does it work. Here with these 3 squares, I have simplified, represented a national energy system consisting of 3 steps of the supply chain. The left part is the energy supply, and on the right we have the energy demand, and application. The connection between them is actually the energy conversion and transportation. So getting as much energy as we need there where we need it. And the 2 big characteristics of each energy systems are reliability and security. To have energy at our usage, at our needs, at any time that we need it. That's a luxury that we live in, and I think in aspect of the recent developments from the last year, we are now realized that this shouldn't be taken for granted. And going there to have another better climate-neutral energy system, who is also reliable, flexible, secure, who has us to offer the same opportunities as this one, we have some challenges to face. And those challenges I have addressed according to each of these blocks of the supply chain. What we need to do on the supply side is to change the structure of the generation portfolio of energy, meaning using renewable sources more intensively. On the conversion technologies and transportation, main part here playing the biggest role is the sector coupling, which means combining several energy carriers with several sectors. Just a keyword for that, for example, electrolyzers or a heat pump. On the on the right side, we see the energy services, so end application, what we need to do there, except of energy efficiency, we also need to lower the demand. And we've heard in the previous section, someone was talking about increasing the supply and lowering the demand of raw materials. But, well, it's not different in the energy sector as well. And now the question is, where does hydrogen here come in play? Is actually hydrogen the silver bullet who will forward us to this super climate neutral energy system? To answer that, I will address firstly the pillars of decarbonizing the system. And here we have selected 4 options. First one is electrification and improving energy efficiency. There where it is possible, especially the electrification. As Leon previously mentioned, this doesn't make sense, for example, for high heat temperature usage, but it does very well make sense when we need heat until 200 degrees. We can integrate heat pump there and lower the gas demand even by 70% of that industry sector. The next one is using CO2 neutral gases. Here we mean the hydrogen, biomethane, bio-SNG, and so on. The carbon capture technologies will also play an important part. So we use some fossil fuels, but we select, we depict the carbon from the processes. And last but not least is the circular economy, which can extend the life cycle of a product and give the materials further value. And these are not the only ones, but I would say the most important pillars, because they make an impact. They make the significant impact in lowering energy demand and decreasing CO2 emissions. Where do we see hydrogen? In this portfolio here, it is a carbon neutral gas, and when combined with carbon capture, we can produce new materials and we can produce new climate neutral fuels. I have selected here one interesting figure from the Austrian hydrogen strategy, which was published last year. We worked on several projects within different sectors. You can see here that the energy is divided between industry, transport, building sector, as well as energy systems, so producing energy. On the left side, with the red color, inefficient processes are represented, and on the right side, we see prioritized use. Why do we even need this? Like, we can use hydrogen instead of natural gas, and that's it. Let's just use it and don't change the processes. With some minor improvements, we can do that. But then in that case, we will need a huge amount of hydrogen and renewable gases. That means it should be used there when it's most needed, and there where no other options are or will be available. And such processes, such sectors are the industry using hydrogen as a feedstock, as reaction agent, and for high temperature applications, in the transport sector for heavy-duty mobility, and for some combined heat and power plants. It's not priority in low-temperature applications and in the private transport. Why? Because there we have options. Here I can pretty well argument the building sector, for example, at least for Austria, and I believe in many countries is the same case. We have enough options there. We have a good electricity grid, we have enough biomass, so we can use heat pumps and biomass to heat our buildings and not burn very expensive energy carrier as hydrogen. When I say very expensive, let's see how expensive is it or it's gonna get. These curves that you see here are done based on a very extensive literature research. With the green line, the hydrogen cost development for the next 20-30 years is represented. And the blue and red line represent the natural gas price. When we compare costs, what we need to be careful about, what is it in those costs considered? On the hydrogen side, we talk about production cost of hydrogen, and the natural gas, it contains the energy share of this energy source and also the CO2 emissions prices. And the outcome of this research was that the CO2 prices are the driver that will lead to this breaking point between hydrogen and natural gas in the time period between 2035 and 2045, depending on how strongly we want to increase the CO2 prices. Now we saw, okay, at some point in time, we will have cost-competitive hydrogen to use it, but will this be enough? Can one country be self-sufficient and produce enough hydrogen or biomethane as needed? The answer is no, because the necessity for hydrogen imports must be considered on a global level. There are a lot of countries, there are a lot of places where the conditions, the natural conditions are just more in favor in using higher full load hours or having lower costs of production of hydrogen. And my point here is, let's not just import energy carriers or hydrogen, but also import-export knowledge, exchange best cases, teach and learn from each other. And with that, I will close my talk for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roberta, for this nice presentation. Now one question here to the audience. How many of you does know what the green, blue hydrogen is? Please raise your hands. Not too many. So, can we ask for the explanation what that means? I saw this green, blue lines, red, but you see sometimes on the costs you have these different types of hydrogen listed. Roberta, please give us the explanation to give a little bit of feeling for the audience.
There is actually a rainbow of colors of hydrogen. There is a white, blue, brown, gray, pink, turquoise, yellow. I will mention three, it's enough. The first one, it's a blue hydrogen, which is produced by fossil fuels, by steam methane reforming of natural gas, but the carbon is being captured. That's a blue hydrogen, and the gray hydrogen is the one which is produced from fossil fuels, but there isn't a technology that will depict the carbon from the process. And green hydrogen means that it is produced only by renewable sources of energy, meaning if you use electrolyzers and you feed it in the electricity grid and the electricity is being produced by natural gas, that's not a green hydrogen. But if you use electricity produced by a wind turbine or by PV, then we can talk further.
So which one is still the cost most beneficial currently? It's still made from fossil fuels?
Gray is the leader, yes.
What was the price difference in this range?
Between natural gas and...
I mean, the let's say green hydrogen, which is only from renewable resources, and let's say blue or red?
I think it's around 3 to 4 times higher.
One more question here. I was always wondering, how many of you knows, you see ammonia many times as a hydrogen source. How this ammonia relates to the hydrogen industry?
Well, I am not that competent to to talk into details about that, but ammonia is a good option to store and transport hydrogen, because you use the hydrogen to produce a liquid ammonia, which is then easier to get transported on further distances.
Yeah, this is the question which, thank you very much. This is always a question which pop in your mind. You see on the headlines. You see this. I read so many times, you even get on the leaflets, you get this blue, green portions of hydrogen, and people are typically, non-experts scratching the head what that means. For them, hydrogen is hydrogen. That's it, the end of the story. Thank you very much. So we now turn to my right side, where we have Mathilde Cluzeau. She is she's going to tell us a little bit about the wind energy market and how the implementation goes, and maybe the community perception towards the windmill as another alternative source dealing with the Green Deal. So Mathilde, please.
Thank you. Yes, so as it was said earlier, the renewable energy market has been in constant growth in the past few years, and wind power has been no exception to the rule. So to give some raw numbers, we have now around 900 gigawatts of wind power capacity worldwide. It does not give a good... this number cannot give a good impression of what it is really, but it still represents a low percentage of the global energy, like less than 10%. And in this fight to develop wind power energy, Europe is one of the major actors, along with Asia, and especially China, who really dominates the market with more than 50% of the wind power capacity, and also North America and the United States. But Europe as we are most of us European in here, I think, really shows great ambition for the next years, especially with the development of offshore wind energy, and is willing to cover like 1/3 of the electricity needs for the European by 2030, in comparison to like it was only 15% of the electricity needs that were covered by wind power in 2021, which was one of the best years for the development of wind energy. So I think that in the next few years, we can certainly expect to see the wind energy market growing strongly, especially because of the operating capacity that is still available, because wind is free and it is available everywhere. And so it opens the door to many opportunities. And I also think that this market is going to expand even more as there is a real commitment around the technological innovation around wind industry, for example, such as floating wind. Maybe you have heard of that in the north of France, in the UK, even in Portugal, which will bring even more opportunities. So then, concerning the implementation of wind industry in the communities, today we have two different ways of using and exploiting the wind power. So whether you build a wind farm to supply the network, which is what we mainly when we see big wind farms across Europe, it is mainly to feed the market and then to give this energy to people. Or you can build a wind farm to supply a particular site. So with WindAid, with our projects at WindAid, it is the second configuration. So effectively, to present a little bit, WindAid is an NGO that also serves as an engineering institute whose project provide a reliable and clean source of energy to remote communities in Peru who do not have access to electricity. So we are doing this by manufacturing artisanal wind turbines, which are about 200 watts each. So it is quite little wind turbines, but which are enough to support the community, which is mainly composed of households, a school, or a hospital. So we, as a little institute, we do not face the same challenges that most developers of wind energy face when trying to implement wind turbines in the territories, because we know that there are many challenges, at least in France and in Europe. But with our projects in WindAid, we are confronted with communities who do not have access to electricity at all. So the projects are well received. But I think that it is something common to every project, whether it is big or a little project, in renewable energy, any type of renewable energy, solar energy, wind energy, to adapt to the communities where it is implemented and to adapt to the industrial means that are available in the region. So this is something we are trying to do at WindAid, like trying to use materials that are from Peru or from regions around us. And I also think that it is something every developer is trying to do, because to be relevant in the renewable energy market and in the green energy market, it seems obvious to use the resources that are around you and not to import resources from all around the world, because it wouldn't make sense. So that's why in WindAid, we do not participate as a major actor of the wind energy market, but we better want to stand as an actor for the development of the green industry by providing a playground for technological innovation in the wind energy sector. Because to be able to develop these projects, we think it is very important to collaborate with universities and companies and even governments to put our energy in the research and development in the right place to develop the sector and to make innovations to fit best to the communities these energies are addressing to.
Thank you. What about, the first thing which comes with, since we have now competing technologies, to my mind is, what about pitfalls of technology? We've been hearing in the news, you have, people complain that wind turbines produce low pitching noise, which is dangerous to humans or animals. Then we had the discussion during lunchtime, how it's with, many times the wind turbines, especially now we had this discussion in Germany with northern fields, the air blades needs to be changed. So the ones which are large cannot be transported, not recycled, and they're just deposited on the fields. There is one more thing which we didn't discuss, but those wind turbines have extremely expensive maintenance because they require special silicone oils which need to be put into the system, as well as other pitfalls. How do you see that the wind turbine or wind energy will overcome these issues? Not only being expensive for maintenance, etc., but also maybe even more sustainable in the future. So because when wind turbines will be exposed on large farms, predicted between England, the European coast and Scandinavian countries will be more, more prone to more harsh environment, temperature changes, etc.
Yes, earlier when I was saying that there were many challenges faced by the project developers, this is exactly what I meant. There are many issues still to be solved, and so the challenges, like you mentioned, noises and stuff, concerning the environmental aspects, I think that the big developers are working along with environmental institutions and the governments. They lead studies to really and better the way they are implementing wind turbines in the territories. And there were different aspects in the question. I don't remember. The material, the fact that the materials are not renewable sometimes. Yes, it is a major challenge. I mean, right now, I don't think we have one perfect source of energy, and every source of energy has their challenges to face. And as it is an emerging market right now, I mean, we already have had wind turbines for decades, but it is really growing exponentially right now. So we are, I think, trying to figure how to proceed with the renewable part of the equipments and everything. So I don't have the answer to the question right now, but this is definitely something to figure out, because it wouldn't make sense to build things that and then having to have not environmental processes to then to renew them. So yes, and about the maintenance, effectively these projects are, I mean, for the offshore wind energy, for example, the wind turbines are now 200 meters high. Like, it is huge. And so, but it is creating jobs. Like, you have new jobs, you have new companies developing for the maintenance. And when I was talking about using the local means, this is exactly what it's about. Like for maintenance, for example, you are gonna work with companies that provide ships to go to the farm and then to do maintenance. So this is what I think wind developer are trying to do, like trying to act locally in order to make it have more sense, and also to work along with the people and the community to be better accepted in the region. Thank you, Mathilde. That was very nice. You know, I have here a friend who's complaining that we are not including him into the conversation, and he's already angry at me. So I need to, because I asked him before, what kind of measures do we need to take in economic growth? And before we move to Professor Marcomini, I asked him what kind of measures should we take in, and he's saying invest in renewable energy. Of course, we know this. This is normal. Adopt to circular economy practices. Then he said promote sustainable agriculture, implement green infrastructure, tax environmental externalities. So he wants us to reduce, there's also payment. Somebody is paying him definitely that we need to put the tax down a little bit. I can read a little bit more carefully. Taxing environmental externalities such as carbon emissions or waste can be initiative businesses and individual to reduce their environmental impact. So he wants to make business already, He's advertising for business, and at the end, it's he's saying actually two more things: encourage sustainable consumption, and at the end, provide education and awareness. And I think this is a very good introduction to my next speaker, to ask him how the policy makers could take a crucial role and change stuff. So if I'm a president and you are my advisor, what would you advise me on the topic? I need to give you the slides. So I give my word to you, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here today with you, and thank you for the introduction. My own presentation, I prepare a few slides on, please, my presentation. No presentation? Okay, very good, yes. Well, I'm now trying to outline the relationship between Green Deal and the green industry, and to show how to implement according to policies, according to strategies, according to actions that have been recently approved in Europe by the Commission, by the Parliament, and according to science and technology trends. So first of all, quite obvious consideration. Green Deal requires a green industry, but also a green industry without a Green Deal would not be realistic. So now we need to be as much as possible realistic. What do we mean by realism? First of all, to respect the timing. Timing is very, very important because we are committed to be by 2050. So by only 27 years, climate, with reference to climate change, neutral. So how to become a climate neutral continent. That means no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. So this is typically an external driver. But in addition to climate neutrality, we also, as Europe, want to be globally competitive and resilient, take into account the emerging economies, first of all, take into account China. So what is needed? Has been already outlined, we need urgently an economy growth decoupled from resource use. And in addition, we want also to pursue a policy where no person and no place is left behind. So putting together these three goals, makes the challenge really, really ambitious. But we need to be realistic. So realism means, first of all, to know very well what the Green Deal means. So what has been approved so far with the Green Deal. I will shortly outline the link between industry and environment. So what the commitment for industry and what are the constraints generated by the actual environmental conditions. Take into account that the focus of the meeting is to understand in the short and medium term the type of resources, the quantity of resources, and the efficiency of the production process. And also take into account how to implement circularity. So how to improve waste generation, how to increase quality and quantity of recycling, also through durability and biodegradability. And last but not least, the energy issue. So how to make the energy system more efficient and also smarter in terms of consumption. The focus of the following slides and of the keywords is on the chemical strategy for sustainability. Why? Because it has been quite recently approved. By chemicals, we refer not only to chemicals, but also to materials. And as you can see, environment means different intervention domains. Today, we focus only on this chemical strategy for sustainability. Why? Because quite recently, so a couple of years ago, for the first time, the chemical strategy for sustainability has been published. It is part of the zero pollution ambition that is a key commitment of the European Green Deal. And the objectives of the chemical strategy for sustainability is first to better protect the citizens and the environment and to support innovation for safe and sustainable chemicals and materials. It is a quite transversal issue. So whatever the technology, whatever the innovation we want to introduce, we need first to keep in due account sustainability and safety. And actions have been already proposed. Here a short list of major proposed actions, banning the most harmful chemicals in consumer products, allowing the use of only essential harmful chemicals, to take into account the so-called cocktail effect, so the mixtures of chemicals and materials, because every day we are exposed to the mixtures and not to individual single chemical and material. Phasing out classes of chemicals, typically the PFAS, just to cite the most recent one, in the European Union, unless their use is essential. And boosting investment and innovative capacity for production and use of chemicals that are safe and sustainable by design throughout their life cycle. So the keywords, the so-called eco-design, putting the emphasis on safety and sustainability over the whole life cycle of any substance, material, process, service. And the actions are around 80. Each action is supported also by an indicative timing. So we have already a timing set at European level. And among these actions, implementing the chemical strategy for sustainability, the promotion of the safe and sustainable by design. So a few consideration of this policy context for safe and sustainable by design. Why? Well, first of all, the safe and sustainable by design must be regarded as a pre-market approach to chemicals and materials, like a prerequisite, focusing on providing a function or a service while avoiding volumes and chemical properties that may be harmful to human health, ecosystems, and so on. Then this approach, the safe and sustainable by design approach, dates quite, let's say, at least 3 decades, because it is the result of, first of all, the Sustainable Development Goals, in general sustainability science, the green chemistry of the 80s, the green engineering of the 90s, circular chemistry 20 years ago, and finally sustainable chemistry, plus absolute sustainability consideration, including the so-called planetary boundaries, safe by design, life cycle assessment, risk assessment, and so on. So the Green Deal priorities take into account a 30 years evolution of these individual approaches. Now, all these individual approaches have been integrated, have been merged into this safe and sustainable by design approach. Here the time course of the individual approaches, the relationship of the strategy with the SDG, especially the Sustainable Development Goals number 3 and 12, the need to include and to use as reference assessment and management tool the life cycle approach, and additionally, for the first time, now we have a framework that is available, that has been approved. So the next question is how to implement this framework, how to integrate the design principles behind the framework, and I strongly recommend first to read the report of the Joint Research Center, the JRC, in ISPRA, that has been in charge of proposing to the Commission the framework. The final version has been quite recently, a few months ago, published. It is based on these principles, promoting the application of the safe and sustainable by design, steering innovation towards the green industrial transition, It provides guidance on how to develop criteria for the design of safe and sustainable chemicals, materials, in such a way to drive innovation, to minimizing or, as far as possible, eliminating the impacts on climate and environment, and comparing chemicals and materials based on safety and sustainability performance for a given function or application context. And so, this is the new scheme, the so-called sustainability dimensions, where safety is the integration, represent the integration of environmental, economic, and social sustainabilities. And also quite important to say that the framework has been built to adhere on the following narrative, which implies a hierarchical role of the different sustainability dimensions, starting from safety. So safety is, at the core, is the pillar of this approach. So another question is how to implement it. So it has been already approved, guidelines are available, and all actors, governmental agencies, and especially industries, are now asked to implement this stepwise approach, starting from, these are the 5 steps: hazard assessment of chemical materials, occupational health and safety aspects of chemicals and materials, human health and environmental effects from the end-use phase, environmental sustainability assessment, social and economic sustainability assessment. So, guidelines are quite clear. They refer to a huge amount of literature published over the last 30 years. And then the system provide a score or a level of safety, environmental sustainability, and social and economic sustainability. And it is very important. To understand the overall evaluation procedure, because still these guidelines and the implementation of the guidelines are, of course, at the very beginning, are at its infancy. So finally, there will be a score system providing the final scoring according to an integrated evaluation of the 3 dimensions. And so here, but you will find the description, the detailed description of the system into this GRC report published a few months ago. Of course, challenges, it has been already outlined, the need of data. So data availability and accessibility is definitely a must. That means we need to agree about transparent processes, but also to get familiar with the new approach methodologies for safety assessment, to consider the possibility and the role of digital developments, very, very important, as well as to implement the so-called fair data principles. That means fundable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Of course, like any assessment procedure, we need also to consider to take into account the data uncertainty. So data quality score based on the use of a pedigree matrix where a score is attributed to the data source, blah, 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 is very important. Reliability, completeness, temporal, geographical, further technological relation, sample size, and so on. So in result, we need more, first of all, research and innovation, and especially research. And the research activities required by this new approach in turn requires case studies. So the selection of case studies will be very, very relevant in order to pave the development of this safety and sustainability by design. So I close this short presentation outlining the need of case studies within European projects. Here a short list of projects recently closed or in progress. But also very important that producers can voluntarily carry out their own case studies. Together with producers, national, international bodies, agencies, in turn voluntarily carrying out their own case studies, and to provide the commissions with the feedback about the results. By the way, this is also the opportunity for anyone, but especially for industrial stakeholders, to register at this website in order to follow the development of the implementation of this new approach. This is a way to show how Green Deal, green industry can, in a quite limited time schedule, because we are speaking about the following years, to develop together quite relevant actions in order to fulfill the commitment approved by the European Parliament.
Thank you. This was extensive, but now I will play a devil's advocate, acting on behalf of 99% of population in European Union, who basically don't understand a word which you said because it's too complex, too ununderstandable. I'll tell you a case. If I play the businessman, I go to the bank. The bank, I want to take a simple loan of 1,000 euros. And the banker said, you cannot get the loan until you sign and read this form, which is 20 pages long, and you declare what you're reproducing, what are you taking, this. And it takes me 1 or 2 hours, and then I realize it's stupid because I want only 1,000 euros. And what would you say? You know, this is not, you know, this is...
Let's start from the banks.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, every revolutionary movement starts from a single slogan. I think that the Green Deal on this is not understand. You know, you cannot give it simply to the people because they don't understand it. So I ask my, you know, since by soul I'm revolutionary, so I ask the ChatGPT what he thinks should be a radical or revolutionary changes in this way, and he proposed me 8 changes, which is much less than European community wants from us. So what he proposed is shift towards steady state economy, which actually relates to the, you know, that we don't have growth, but we operate within the limits of natural resources. He said, implement a carbon tax and dividend. The European Union is actually thinking about this, especially for foreign products, which need to fly over. He said, establish a global carbon market. Then he said, he's not that revolutionary. I mean, in worse, you know, they will say, well, let's reduce population. Maybe in a couple of years he will say reduce population. Yeah, exterminate. Then he said, ban a single-use plastic. 5, embrace a plant-based diet. I'm not reading the explanation, but I'm just giving you the points, because that's easy to remember. And 6, regulate industrial agriculture. And 7, promote public transportation. More people, more let's. What do you think about these things?
Well, first
Could
of
be
all,
this more approachable for a normal European citizen than, you know, measurements of impact?
you are speaking about the endpoints. Of course, endpoints, by definition, are more easily understandable. While it's much more difficult to understand how to achieve the endpoint. For instance, what do we mean by sustainable transportation? Okay.
Yeah, this is my question, which I actually put in the
Right.
beginning, as what the green economy
so
is.
what
By the
let's say what I'm saying is that first of all we can't forget whatever the technology, whatever and so on, we need always to start from the essential bricks. I mean chemicals and materials, because by definitions, chemicals and materials are the components of any technology and so on. And so the question is, what about the processing, the manufacturing? What about the consumption, the post-consumption, the once in the environment, the environmental fate, and so on? Because again, we produced a lot in terms of knowledge about these topics. And now it is really time to use as much as possible what we have been produced. And nowadays, we know everything. Unfortunately, for instance, just an example, we knew too late that the greenhouse gases are
damaging the environment.
Yeah, but why? But why? This is the question I ask you. Why? Because of the persistency. Because CO2, that is toxicologically innocuous, so it's definitely not harmful, it's a beneficial substance, but CO2 in the lower atmosphere lasts centuries. So the persistence of the greenhouse gases, take into account the continuum, blah, 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 is going to and alter the climate, the greenhouse effect, and so on.
Okay.
So lack of knowledge. Now we have the knowledge. How to implement this knowledge, first of all, inside the technologies, but also through, and that is very important, education. So first of all, it's quite obvious that the banks need more experts in safety and sustainability, because they must certify before.
But sounds very administrative. We don't have that much time. I actually moved to this position because now I'm playing investor. I don't know if you wanted to say something, but I have a question for you.
Very good. Let's go there then as well. But very quickly is that you were saying, okay, how to make it sort of understandable for people what we're trying to do. But I think that there's always one sort of misjudgment in this whole thing, is that the energy transition or the drive towards sustainability is not a market-driven principle. We don't do it for the money, because otherwise we wouldn't have done it anyway. We do it because we want to avoid catastrophic climate change. I think that is something you have to always keep in mind.
But now I have a question for you. You come from a company.
How much
So
it
now
cost?
I like to be president. That's why I'm standing in this position. So now I'm talking as a president who has money in the pocket. So if I would be a president, a question for Leon, where would you invest the money that we actually make this transition happen? Actually, that, you know, and maybe it's a spill out effect, but maybe something returns in the pockets of the state. So if I'm a French president, Macron, and I offer you, I'll give you money, whatever you say, just do it as quickly as possible, as I won't say dirty as possible, but where would you invest your money?
Yeah. That's a very good question. If I know that answer, I wouldn't be sitting here. I was an investor somewhere else. But no, I think, but just to give you, there's only two reasons why industry, for example, or a firm does something. Either it is going to be too costly to continue, or they have a reward. Those are the two things. There's nothing else in between. Most firms don't think about sustainability
State is in
themselves.
between. State can actually get the loss. We are always building infrastructure, which is always a loss.
Yeah, it's a loss.
So somebody needs to take the burden of the
course,
loss, which is typically, citizens of the state.
Yeah, but if you are then an investor or you're a president, basically what you have to do is, I think what the European Union is doing quite well now, is this carbon border adjustment mechanism, for example, is going to work out fine if we get it implemented.
GDP, what he was saying, carbon tax.
Exactly, that's exactly what we need to do. Yeah. And then the investment also becomes worth it, because then you are creating a level playing field, and that's what most firms and most industry want to have. Because then you cannot run away to Bangladesh, start polluting, and then have the same sales revenue that you had before. Yeah. So where do I have to invest? I actually have no idea. But you have to invest at least in decarbonization if there is a level playing field. And I think that's the most important one.
Yeah, I was hoping you'll give me a tip. So
I'm sorry.
I get the pocket. Yeah. I have actually two more questions for the ladies. Here, there's one more thing which maybe you're not aware, but this carbon market. So since the companies need to become neutral, eventually they'll have to buy forests. Otherwise, they will never be neutral. They will have to either buy coupons or have something what they can sell on. But quickly moving to the question, so now I'm not president anymore. So now investor, I'm banker, like I'm supposed to be. And, what do you see, which company should I invest in hydrogen? Which type of hydrogen should I invest? To get the biggest return and save the world.
How many % do I get from your profit if I answer the question?
State is not demanding.
I mean, if you're doing business.
Okay, I'm a businessman. If I'm greedy, I would say 10, 15, but if it depends how risky the business is.
No, I'm not. I'm not that brave, to be honest, to tell a name of company. Now, I can only say that electrolysis is my field of interest, and I will leave it there.
What kind of electrolysis?
PEM electrolyzers. Why I answered like that? Mm-hmm. Because it connects the gas and electricity grid very well. It's an important sector coupling element, and it can give us green hydrogen. I wouldn't go into details. The challenges are big, but the opportunities are big as well.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm a very poor guy. I have no money in the pocket. And I move to the next question. So I'm becoming poor. I saw, Mathilde was showing us Peru. So now I have absolutely no money in my pocket. I'm looking at this nice big wind turbines. Maybe I'm bothered by the sound, but I'm so poor that I don't mind the sound. What would you advise me so I would be rich in the future? I would, what would you, how I would proceed with no money in the pocket, and I want to have a windmill on my garden producing the electricity for me. Should I turn to your company and ask them, please?
Yes.
Please give me one turbine.
Yes. Actually, it is what we are trying to do with WindAid. The WindAid Institute, we are providing this energy. So there are two aspects, like the NGO aspect, where we try to provide a reliable source of energy to communities, remote communities, without charging them, because we are giving free electricity to these communities. And we have the other aspect, which is the Engineering Institute aspects, where we are trying to be field testing for new technologies. Mm-hmm. So with that, we are trying to get investments and partnerships with companies, universities. For example, we have had several projects with Airbus to develop the generators or the blades to improve the efficiency of the wind turbine. But I think that all of this is to be at benefits to the populations who have, especially those who have no access to such a basic need as electricity. So this is exactly what we're trying to do here.
So basically you have a very flexible model which can adapt to any pocket, even if it's empty.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. I like this. I will hang out with her in the coffee break, definitely. I will have a couple of, I will allow 2 quick questions, if you don't mind a little bit of coffee.
Last comment.
No, not comment.
I
still one question for her. I didn't let her talk too much. But I'm still worried here. If I'm really poor, my wind turbine will work only when the wind will be blowing. What will happen when I have no wind? Do you provide any solution to the small households, cities, also within your as a part of a solution?
Yes, of course. So as effectively, there is the question of the wind energy not being constant. So effectively, this is a great question. But just to explain a little bit how the wind turbine works, the energy, so you can whether use directly the energy that is created from the wind, or we also have batteries where you can stock the energy. You can put the energy.
What about hydrogen? We've been discussing. Can you put this also? Do you have the packs which also couple with
yes,
hydrogen
I
economy?
think there are a lot of opportunities to make links between different type of renewable energies. So I don't really know about hydrogen, but for example, in Peru, we are combining solar panels with wind turbines, so that we can whether use one or the other, especially because in Peru, the government is really relying on solar energy because it is quite simpler to manufacture than wind turbine. But I think there are definitely links to be made between the different sources of renewable energies, and it is very important, as it was said before, to focus on the development, the research for these technologies to be developed. And yes, this is something we're trying to say by providing a field testing playground for industries and universities to test these new technologies.
Okay, thank you. One last comment here before we go to the public.
Yes, it's not only a matter of economy, it's not only a matter of technology, it's definitely a matter of governance. Okay, we did not approach this issue, but this is very, very important. Whatever the scale, these issues need definitely a quite strong governance. And governance means, first of all, the involvement, the inclusion of all stakeholders, and so on.
All stakeholders need to be in line with this. Any quick questions from the public? 2, 3?
Right, so I think I'm also, other than Abilities Europe CEO, investor in the venture capital industry. I'm a venture capital partner with the Mobility Fund, and I'm also investor in medium-sized renewable projects. Now, one thing that prevents me from investing into the hydrogen applications is specifically, like Roberta, you showed us the map, the graph, right? And there is a point where it sort of breaks even. And that point is, of course, dependent on a very stochastic market, which is the carbon trading system. The problem with any stochastic system is the prices can go up to infinity, but they can also go down to zero, or negative even, which is also possible. So, therefore, it's not possible for me to model future cash flows which give me certain certainty of the market. I mean, good example, just today, Indonesia's dominance in the cobalt production definitively rules out the projects that we were discussing in Europe for cobalt mining in Europe, for Europe. Yeah. So one good thing that has happened, however, within Europe is in Germany, where they have implemented since 2019 a progressively increasing carbon price floor. And apparently that still hasn't made it to the European Union level. What's your thought on that, Roberta? Would that make your life easier?
It's not a simple question to answer to, but what I think that one big aspect when talking about investing in hydrogen is that the investors can contribute in decreasing the production costs of hydrogen. Why is it so expensive? Because we don't have large production at scale. And if this was happening decentralized in many countries, then the prices can also go very down very quickly. The same as with the carbon prices, as you mentioned. So I think that we need best practice cases to learn from them, make these groupations according to renewable potentials, according to high hydrogen demand, and then to build the base for lower hydrogen costs from down to the top.
Thank you. Now, last question, and then the break. Otherwise, somebody is going to be angry at me.
I think there's a reason why Alexandre invited me, and that's to be continually controversial. I think I could, from Alberta, potentially provide you with hydrogen at 1/4 to 1/8 the price of the electro-winning hydrogen. It's not green, it's turquoise. And it's being piloted in the suburbs of the city of Edmonton. And it's co-invented by 2 faculty, one from the University of Alberta and one from the University of Toronto. And it basically takes methane and cracks it in an anaerobic environment into hydrogen and carbon. And so it's being piloted presently, and if it's commercially successful, which all indications are it will be, we're going to have a new material, cheap material to work with, and that is carbon.
Yeah, I saw this in the beginning. I don't know if you noticed in the morning when we had the plenary speaker, carbon was labeled as raw material. It was, I noticed this, it came, I didn't manage to actually ask the question because everything was too quick, but it was one of the elements on the listed market with the red line around with all the elements, which is, well, for me, was surprising. Okay, we need to conclude and take a coffee. When do we need to get back? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? So it's a brief coffee. And let's thank the speaker. Thank you very much for being with us and talking and discussing this.